Peter Terry was addicted to heroin. We were friends in college and continued to be after I graduated. Notice that I said, I. He dropped out after 2 years of barely cutting it. After I moved out of the dorms and into a small apartment, I didn't see Peter as much. We would talk online every now and then. AIM was king in pre-Facebook years. And there was a period where he wasn't online for about 5 weeks straight. I wasn't worried. He was a pretty notorious flake and a drug addict, so I assumed that he just stopped caring. And then one night, I saw him log on. And before I could initiate a conversation, he sent me a message. David, man, we need to talk. And that's when he told me about the NoEnd house. It got that name because no one had ever reached the final exit. The rules were pretty simple and cliche. Reach the final room of the building and you win $500. There were 9 rooms in all. The house was located outside the city, roughly 4 miles from my house. Apparently, Peter had tried and failed. He was a heroin and who knows what the fuck addict, so I figured that the drugs got the best of him, and he wigged out at a paper ghost or something. He told me it would be too much for anyone, that it was unnatural. I didn't believe him. I told him I would check it out the next night, and no matter how hard he tried to convince me otherwise, $500 sounded too good to be true. I had to go. I set out the following night. When I arrived, I immediately noticed something strange about the building. Have you ever seen or read something that shouldn't be scary, but for some reason, a chill crawls up your spine? I walked towards the building, and the feeling of uneasiness only intensified as I opened the front door. My heart slowed, and I let a relieved sigh leave me as I entered. The room looked like a normal hotel lobby decorated for Halloween. A sign was posted in place of a worker. It read, "Room 1, this way. 8 more follow. Reach the end and you win." I chuckled and made my way to the first door. The first area was almost laughable. The decor resembled the Halloween aisle of a Kmart, complete with sheet ghosts and animatronic zombies that gave a static growl when you passed by. At the far end was an exit. It was the only door besides the one I entered through. I brushed through the fake spider webs and headed for the second room. I was greeted by fog as I opened the door to the next room. The room definitely upped the ante in terms of technology. Not only was there a fog machine, but a bat hung from the ceiling and flew in circles. Scary. They seemed to have a Halloween soundtrack that one would find in the 99-cent store on loop somewhere in the room. I didn't see a stereo, but I guess they must have used a PA system. I stepped over a few toy rats that wheeled around and walked with a puffed chest across to the next area. I reached for the doorknob. And my heart sank to my knees. I did not want to open that door. A feeling of dread hit me so hard that I could barely even think. Logic overtook me after a few terrified moments, and I shook it off and entered the next room. Room 3 is when things began to change. On the surface, it looked like a normal room. There was a chair in the middle of the wooden paneled floor. A single lamp in the corner did a poor job of lighting the area, casting a few shadows across the floor and walls. That was the problem. Shadows. Plural. With the exception of the chairs, there were others. I had barely walked in the door, and I was already terrified. It was at that moment that I knew something wasn't right. I didn't even think as I automatically tried to open the door that I came through. It was locked from the other side. That set me off. There was something locking the doors as I progressed. There was no way. I would have heard them. Was it a mechanical lock that's set automatically? Maybe. but I was too scared to really think. I turned back to the room, and the shadows were gone. The chair's shadow remained, but the others were gone. I slowly began to walk. I used to hallucinate when I was a kid, so I wrote off the shadows as a figment of my imagination. I began to feel better as I made it to the halfway point of the room. I looked down as I took my steps. And that's when I saw it. Or didn't see it. My shadow wasn't there. I didn't have time to scream. I ran as fast as I could to the other door and flung myself without thinking into the room beyond. The fourth room was possibly the most disturbing. As I closed the door, all light seemed to be sucked out and put back into the previous room. I stood there, surrounded by darkness, not able to move. I'm not afraid of the dark and never have been, but I was absolutely terrified. All sight had left me. I held my hand in front of my face, and if I didn't know what I was doing, I would never have been able to tell. Darkness doesn't describe it. I couldn't hear anything. It was dead silence. When you're in a soundproof room, you can still hear yourself breathing. You can hear yourself being alive. I couldn't. I began to stumble forward after a few moments, my rapid beating heart the only thing that I could feel. There was no door in sight. I wasn't even sure there was one this time. The silence was then broken by a low hum. I felt something behind me. I spun around wildly, but could barely even see my nose. I knew it was there, though. Regardless of how dark it was, I knew something was there. The hum grew louder. Closer. It seemed to surround me, but I knew whatever was causing the noise was in front of me, inching closer. I took a step back. I had never felt that kind of fear. I can't really describe true fear. I wasn't even scared I was going to die. I was scared of what the alternative was. I was afraid of what the thing had in store for me. Then the lights flashed for a second and I saw it. Nothing. I saw nothing, and I know I saw nothing there. The room was again plunged into darkness, and the hum became a wild screech. I screamed in protest. I couldn't hear the goddamn sound for another minute. I ran backwards away from the noise and fumbled for the door handle. I turned and fell into room 5. Before I describe room 5, you have to understand something. I am not a drug addict. I've had no history of drug abuse or any sort of psychosis short of the childhood hallucinations that I mentioned earlier, and those were only when I was really tired or just waking up. I entered the NoEnd house with a clear head. After falling in from the previous room, my view from room 5 was from my back looking up at the ceiling. What I saw didn't scare me. It simply surprised me. Trees had grown into the room and towered above my head. The ceilings in this room were taller than the others, which made me think that I was in the center of the house. I got up off the floor, dusted myself off, and took a look around. It was definitely the biggest room of them all. I couldn't even see the door from where I was. Various brush and trees must have blocked my line of sight with the exit. Up to this point, I figured the rooms were going to get scarier, but this was a paradise compared to the last room. I also assumed whatever was in room 4 stayed back there. I was incredibly wrong. As I made my way deeper into the room, I began to hear what one would hear if they were in a forest Chirping bugs and the occasional flap of birds seemed to be my only company in this room. That was the thing that bothered me the most. I heard the bugs and other animals, but I didn't see any of them. I began to wonder how big this house was. From the outside, when I first walked up to it, it looked like a regular house. It was definitely on the bigger side, but this was almost a full forest in here. The canopy covered my view of the ceiling, but I assumed it was still there, however high it was. I couldn't see any walls either. The only way I knew I was still inside was that the floor matched the other rooms, the standard dark wood paneling. I kept walking, hoping that the next tree I passed would reveal the door. After a few moments of walking, I felt a mosquito fly onto my arm. I shook it off. A second later, I felt about 10 more land on my skin at different places. I felt them crawl up and down my arms and legs, and a few made their way across my face. I flailed wildly to get them all off, but they just kept crawling. I looked down and let out a muffled scream. No, more of a whimper, to be honest. I didn't see a single bug. Not one bug was on me, but I could feel them crawl. I heard them fly by my face and sting my skin, but I couldn't see a single one. I dropped to the ground and began to roll wildly. I was desperate. I hated bugs, especially ones I couldn't see or touch, but these bugs could touch me, and they were everywhere. I began to crawl. I had no idea where I was going. The entrance was nowhere in sight, and I still hadn't even seen the exit, so I just crawled, my skin wriggling with the presence of those phantom bugs. After what seemed like hours, I felt the door. I grabbed the nearest tree and propped myself up, mindlessly slapping my arms and legs to no avail. I tried to run, but I couldn't. My body was exhausted from crawling and dealing with whatever it was that was on me. I took a few shaky steps to the door, grabbing each tree on the way for support. It was only a few feet away when I heard it. The low hum from before. It was coming from the next room, and it was deeper. I could almost feel it inside of my body, like when you stand next to an amp at a concert. The feeling of the bugs on me lessened as the hum grew louder. As I placed my hand on the doorknob, the bugs were completely gone. But I couldn't bring myself to turn the knob. I knew that if I let go, the bugs would return, and there was no way I would make it back to room 4. I just stood there, my head pressed against the door marked 6, and my hand shakily grasping the knob. The hum was so loud I couldn't even hear myself pretend to think. There was nothing I could do but move on. Room 6 was next. And room 6 was hell. I closed the door behind me. My eyes held shut and my ears ringing. The hum was surrounding me. As the door clicked into place, the hum was gone. I opened my eyes in surprise, and the door that I had shut was gone. It was just a wall now. I looked around in shock. The room was identical to room 3. Same chair and lamp, but with correct amount of shadows this time. The only real difference was that there was no exit door, and the one I came through was gone. As I said before, I had no previous issues in terms of mental instability, but at that moment, I fell into what I now know was insanity. I didn't scream. I didn't make a sound. At first, I scratched, softly. The walls were tough, but I knew the door was there somewhere. I just knew it was. I scratched it where the doorknob was. I clawed at the wall frantically with both hands. My nails were filed down to the skin against the wood. I fell silently to my knees, the only sound in the room, the incessant scratching against the wall. I knew it was there. The door was there. I knew it was there. I knew if I could just get past this wall. "Are you all right?" I jumped off the ground and spun in one motion. I leaned against the wall behind me, and I saw what it was that spoke to me. To this day, I regret ever turning around. There was a little girl. She was wearing a soft white dress that went down to her ankles. She had long blonde hair to the middle of her back, and white skin and blue eyes. She was the most frightening thing I had ever seen, and I know that nothing in my life will ever be as unnerving as what I saw in her. While looking at her, I saw something else. Where she stood, I saw what looked like a man's body, only larger than normal, and covered in hair. He was naked from head to toe, but his head was not human, and his toes were hoofs. It wasn't the devil. But at that moment, it might as well have been. The form had the head of a ram and the snout of a wolf. It was horrifying, and it was synonymous with the little girl in front of me. They were the same form. I can't really describe it, but I saw them at the same time. They shared the same spot in the room, but it was like looking at two separate dimensions. When I saw the girl, I saw the form. When I saw the form, I saw the girl. I couldn't speak. I could barely even see. My mind was revolting against what it was attempting to process. I had been scared before in my life. I had never been more scared than when I was trapped in the 4th room, but that was before room 6. I just stood there staring at whatever it was that spoke to me. There was no exit. I was trapped here with it. And then it spoke again. "David, you should have listened." When it spoke, I heard the words of the little girl, but the other form spoke through my mind in a voice I won't attempt to describe. There was no other sound. The voice just kept repeating the sentence over and over and over again in my head, and I agreed. I didn't know what to do. I was slipping into madness, yet couldn't take my eyes off of what was in front of me. I dropped to the floor. I thought that I had passed out, but the room wouldn't let me. I just wanted it to end. I was on my side, my eyes wide open, and the form staring down at me, scurrying across the floor in front of me, was one of the battery-powered rats from the 2nd room. The house was toying with me. But for some reason, seeing that rat pulled my mind back from whatever depths it was headed. And I looked around the room. I was getting out of there. I was determined to get out of that house and live and never think about this place again. I knew this room was hell, and I wasn't ready to take up residency. At first, it was just my eyes that moved. I searched the walls for any kind of opening. The room wasn't that big, so it didn't take long to soak up the entire layout. The demon still taunted me, the voice growing louder as the form stayed rooted where it stood. I placed my hand on the floor, lifted myself up to all fours, and turned to scan the wall behind me. Then I saw something I couldn't believe. The form was now right at my back, whispering into my mind how I shouldn't have come. I felt its breath on the back of my neck, but I refused to turn around. A large rectangle was scratched into the wood, with a small dent chipped away in the center of it. Right in front of my eyes, I saw the large 7 I had mindlessly etched into the wall. I knew what it was. Room 7 was just beyond that wall where room 5 was moments ago. I don't know how I'd done it. Maybe it was just my state of mind at the time, but I had created the door. I knew I had. In my madness, I had scratched into the wall what I needed the most, an exit to the next room. Room 7 was close. I knew the demon was right behind me, but for some reason it couldn't touch me. I closed my eyes and placed both hands on the large 7 in front of me. I pushed as hard as I could. The demon was now screaming in my ear. It told me that I was never leaving. It told me that this was the end, but I wasn't going to die. I was going to live there in room 6 with it. I wasn't. I pushed and screamed at the top of my lungs. I knew I was going to push through the wall eventually. I clenched my eyes shut and screamed, and the demon was gone. I was left in silence. I turned around slowly and was greeted by the room as it was when I entered. Just a chair. And a lamp. I couldn't believe it. But I didn't have time to waste. I turned back to the 7 and jumped back slightly. What I saw was a door. And it wasn't the one that I'd scratched in, but a regular door with a large 7 on it. My whole body was shaking. It took me a while to turn the knob. I just stood there for a while, staring at the door. I couldn't stay in room 6. I couldn't. But if this was only room 6, I couldn't imagine what 7 had in store. I must have stood there for an hour, just staring at the 7. And finally, with a deep breath, I twisted the knob and opened the door to room 7. I stumbled through the door, mentally exhausted and physically weak. The door behind me closed. And I realized where I was. I was outside. Not outside like room 5, but actually outside. My eyes stung. I wanted to cry. I fell to my knees and tried, but I couldn't. I was finally out of that hell. I didn't even care about the prize that was promised. I turned and saw that the door I just went through was the entrance. I walked to my car and I drove home thinking of how nice a shower sounded. I pulled up to my house. I felt uneasy. The joy of leaving NoEnd house had faded. And dread was slowly building in my stomach. I shook it off as a residual from the house and made my way to the front door. I entered and immediately went up to my room. There on my bed was my cat, Baskerville. It was the first living thing that I'd seen all night, and I reached to pet him. He hissed and swiped at my hand. I recoiled in shock. He'd never acted like that. Whatever. He's an old cat, I thought. I jumped in the shower, get ready for what I was expecting to be a sleepless night. And after my shower, I went to the kitchen to make something to eat. I descended the stairs and turned to the family room. What I saw would be forever burned into my mind, however. My parents were lying on the ground, naked and covered in blood. They were mutilated to near unidentifiable states. Their limbs were removed and placed next to their bodies. Their heads were placed on their chests facing me. And the most unsettling part was their expressions. They were smiling as though they were happy to see me. I vomited and sobbed there in the family room. I didn't know what had happened. They didn't even live with me at the time. I was a mess. And then I saw it. A door that was never there before. A door with a large 8 scrawled on it in blood. I was still in the house. I was standing in my family room, but I was in room 7. The faces of my parents smiled wider as I realized this. They weren't my parents, they couldn't be. But they looked exactly like them. The door marked 8 was across the room behind the mutilated bodies in front of me. I knew I had to move on, but at that moment I gave up. The smiling faces tore into my mind. They grounded me where I stood. I vomited again and nearly collapsed. Then the hum returned. It was louder than ever, and it filled the house and shook the walls. The hum compelled me to walk. I began to walk, slowly, making my way closer to the door and the bodies. I could barely stand, let alone walk, and the closer I got to my parents, the closer I came to suicide. The walls were now shaking so hard it seemed as though they were going to crumble, but still the faces smiled at me as I inched closer, their eyes following me. I was now between the 2 bodies, a few feet away from the door. The dismembered hands clawed their way across the carpet towards me, all the while the faces continued to stare. New terror washed over me, and I walked faster. I didn't want to hear them speak. I didn't want the voices to match those of my parents. They began to open their mouths, and the hands were inches from my feet. In a dash of desperation, I lunged towards the door, threw it open, and slammed it behind me. Room 8. I was done. After what I had just experienced, I knew there wasn't anything else this fucking house could throw at me that I couldn't live through. There was nothing short of fires of hell that I wasn't ready for. But unfortunately, I underestimated the abilities of a NoEnd house. Unfortunately, things got more disturbing, more terrifying, and more unspeakable in room 8. I still have trouble believing what I saw in room 8. Again, the room was a carbon copy of rooms 3 and 6, but sitting in the usual empty chair was a man. After a few seconds of disbelief, my mind finally accepted the fact that the man sitting in the chair was me. Not someone who looked like me. It was David Williams. I walked closer. I had to get a better look, even though I was sure of it. He looked up at me, and I noticed tears in his eyes. Please. Please don't do it. Please. Please don't hurt me. What? I asked. Who are you? I'm not going to hurt you. Yes, you are. He was sobbing. You're going to hurt me. And I don't want you to. He sat in the chair with his legs up and began rocking back and forth. It was actually pretty pathetic looking, especially since he was me, identical in every way. Listen, who are you? I was now only a few feet from my doppelganger. It was the weirdest experience yet. Standing there talking to myself. I wasn't scared, but I would be soon. Why are you? You're going to hurt me! You're going to hurt me! If you want to leave, you're going to hurt me. Why are you saying this? Calm down, alright? Let's just try and figure that... And then I saw it. The David sitting down was wearing the same clothes as me. except for a small red patch on his shirt, embroidered with the number 9. You're going to hurt me! You're going to hurt me! Don't, please, you're going to hurt me! You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me. Please don't hurt me. Please. My eyes didn't leave that small number on his chest. I knew exactly what it was. The first few doors were plain and simple, but after a while they got a little more ambiguous. 7 was scratched into the wall. By my own hands, 8 was marked in blood above the bodies of my parents, but 9... 9. This number was on a person. A living person. Worse still, it was on a person that looked exactly like me. David? I had to ask. Yes. Yes. You're going to hurt me. You're going to hurt me. He continued to sob and rock. He answered to David. He was me, right down to the voice. But that 9... I paced around for a few minutes when he sobbed in his chair. The room had no doors, and similarly to room 6, the door I came through was gone. For some reason, I assumed the scratching would get me nowhere this time, and I studied the walls and the floor around the chair, sticking my head underneath, seeing if anything was below. Fortunately, there was. Below the chair was a knife. Attached was a tag that read, "To David, from management." The feeling in my stomach as I read that tag was something sinister. I wanted to throw up, and the last thing I wanted to do was remove the knife from under the chair. The other David was still sobbing uncontrollably. My mind was spinning into an attic of unanswerable questions. Who put this here? How did they get my name? Not to mention the fact that, as I knelt on the cold wood floor, I also sat in that chair, sobbing in protest of being hurt by myself. It was all too much to process. The house and the management had been playing with me this whole time. My thoughts, for some reason, turned to Peter and whether or not he got this far. If he did, if he met a Peter Terry sobbing in this very chair, rocking back and forth with... I shook those thoughts out of my head. They didn't matter. I took the knife from under the chair, and immediately, the other David went quiet. "David," he said in my voice, "what do you think you're going to do?" I lifted myself from the ground and clutched the knife in my hand. "I'm going to get out of here." David was still sitting in the chair, though he was very calm now. He looked up at me with a slight grin. I couldn't tell if he was going to laugh or strangle me, and slowly he got up from the chair and stood facing me. It was uncanny. His height and even the way he stood matched mine. I felt the rubber hilt of the knife in my hand and gripped it tighter. I didn't know what I was planning. I didn't know what I was planning on doing with it, but I had a feeling I was going to need it. Now, his voice was slightly deeper than my own. "I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you, and I'm going to keep you here." I didn't respond. I just lunged and tackled him to the ground. I had mounted him and looked down, knife poised and ready. He looked up at me, terrified. It was like I was looking in a mirror. And then the hum returned, low and distant. though I still felt it deep in my body. David looked up at me as I looked down at myself. The hum was getting louder, and I felt something inside of me snap. With one motion, I slammed the knife into the patch on his chest and ripped it down. Blackness fell on the room. And I was falling. Darkness around me was like nothing I had experienced. Up to that point, room 4 was dark, but it didn't come close to what was completely engulfing me. I wasn't even sure that I was falling after a while. I felt weightless, covered in black. And then a deep sadness came over me. I felt lost, depressed, and suicidal. The sight of my parents entered my mind. I knew it wasn't real, but I had seen it. And the mind had trouble differentiating between what was real and what wasn't. The sadness only deepened. I was in room 9 for what seemed like days. The final room. And that's exactly what it was. The end. NoEnd house had an end, and I had reached it. And at that moment, I gave up. I knew that I would be in that in-between state forever, accompanied by nothing but darkness. Not even the hum was there to keep me sane. I had lost all senses. I couldn't feel myself. I couldn't hear anything. Sight was completely useless here. I searched for a taste in my mouth and found nothing. I felt disembodied and completely lost. I knew where I was. This was hell. Room 9 was hell. And then it happened. A light. One of those stereotypical lights at the end of the tunnel. I felt ground come up from below me, and I was standing. For a moment or two, gathering my thoughts and senses, I slowly walked towards the light. As I approached the light, it took form. It was a vertical slit down the side of an unmarked door. I slowly walked through the door and found myself back where I started. The lobby of NoEnd house. It was exactly how I left it, still empty, still decorated with childish Halloween decorations after everything that had happened that night. I was still wary of where I was. After a few moments of normalcy, I looked around the place, trying to find anything different. And on the desk was a plain white envelope with my name handwritten on it. Immensely curious, but still cautious, I mustered up the courage to open the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten. David Williams. Congratulations, you've made it to the end of NoEnd house. Please accept this prize as a token of great achievement. Yours forever. Management. And with the letter were 5 $100 bills. I couldn't stop laughing. I laughed for what seemed like hours. I laughed as I walked out to my car. And I laughed as I drove home. And I laughed as I pulled up to my driveway. And I laughed as I opened my front door to my house. And I laughed as I saw the small 10 etched into the wood.
It had only been 3 weeks since I heard any word from David. In the 6 months that we started dating, we had only gone 3 days without talking, and that was after a pretty intense fight. There was nothing out of the ordinary when I had talked to him last. He had just mentioned that he was going to check something out for a friend. Then I got a weird text the night before. It was from David, but it wasn't from his number. It only had 5 words in it. NoEnd, don't come, David. Something was wrong. After I read that text, I felt nauseous, as if I was seeing something I shouldn't. I decided to get a hold of Peter, but I had talked to his ass before. He was a deadbeat, but at least he might have some information on where David might be. I decided to log onto Instant Messenger with David's account. I figured it might be easier to start something with Peter if he didn't know it was me. When I logged on, he immediately messaged me.
David? Holy shit. You had me worried. I thought you went to the house.
What do you mean?
NoEnd house, man. That place I told you about. I could have sworn you were gonna go.
NoEnd. This guy knew what was going on. Yeah, I actually couldn't find it. Maybe I'll try again tomorrow. Where was it again?
No way. You already had me worried. Fuck that place. I've been there. You don't want to go there.
Peter, this is Maggie.
Wait, what? Where's David?
I don't know. I thought you would know, but apparently not.
Oh shit. Oh shit.
What? Seriously, Peter, you need to tell me what's going on.
I think he went to the house. It's outside of down, maybe 4 miles down, Terrence Street. Unmarked road, turn right. Shit, man. He's gone.
No, I don't think he is.
What are you planning on doing?
I'm going to get him back. I left the next night around 8. There wasn't a single car in the entire trip. And as I turned onto the unmarked street, I saw a sign pointed down the road. NoEnd this way. Open 24 hours. My breathing hadn't been steady since I left my house, and seeing the house didn't help anything. There weren't any other cars around, which made me think that it wasn't open. A light from the front stoop illuminated the area, and the windows showed that the lights were on inside. I parked my car and walked up to the front and made my way in. The front lobby was normal enough, but as I predicted, there wasn't anyone there. All the lights were on, but no one was there. Besides the door I came through, there was only one other. Posted next to it was another sign. Room 1, this way. 8 more follow. Reach the end, and you win. That wasn't what made my stomach sink. That wasn't what stopped my heart. There was more below, scrawled and handwritten in red. You won't save him. I must have stood in that lobby for an hour. I was frozen. I didn't know how to go on. Do I go through the door? Do I call the police? After reading that sign, I decided that I might have bit off more than I could chew. I'm an average height for a girl, and I'm pretty thin. I wasn't about to fight off some psycho that was holding David hostage. I decided calling the cops was the best thing to do, so I reached into my pocket and opened my phone to call. No service. The house must be blocking the signal, and it was basically in the middle of nowhere. I walked towards the entrance, figuring I'd find service outside. I reached to the knob and twisted. Nothing. It was locked. I shook harder. Nothing. It was locked from the outside. I slammed my hands against the door and called out to anyone that could hear me. I knew it was useless. No one was out here, except me. Then I felt a vibration in my pocket. I reached down and looked at my phone. One unread text. At first I was really glad I had service. I was saved. Maybe the text was from David, that he was alright, that it was from a different number, one I didn't have in my phone. I pressed open and nearly dropped the phone. You can't save yourself either, My entire body was shaking. I wanted to pass out. I was stuck there. A cell phone with no service, in a room with no exit. My eyes scanned the room and landed on the door across the room. A gold one was mounted on the front. It looked like the room door in a hotel. The ground felt far away as I walked closer to the door. In a few moments I was within inches, and I placed my head against the wood and listened. All I heard was distant Halloween music. This creepy instrumental music you'd hear at any haunted house. Suddenly I got a little calmer. David was always known for his pranks. He would tell me about these elaborate setups that he and his friends would make for the new players on their soccer team. Somehow a smile found its way onto my face, and I opened the door without fear. Entering the first room alleviated my fears even more. The room was completely normal, attempt at a haunted house. Even though rather lacking, in each corner was a scarecrow, but not even scary ones. They were the kind you used to see in grade school, with big smiling faces. Paper ghosts hung from the ceiling, and a fan at the corner added a cold breeze that made them spin. Next to the scarecrows was again the only other door in the room. Printed on the front, similar to the first door, was a large 2. I laughed and left this lame room behind me. When I opened the door to room 2, I couldn't see 3 feet in front of me. It was completely filled with a gray mist that smelled like rubber. I guess there had to be some fog machine in here, and it must have been pumping this stuff for hours. There were no windows in this last room, so the ventilation must have been terrible. I walked slowly forward and let out a small shriek. I'd bumped straight into a large robotic Jason Voorhees. His eyes flashed red and the knife in his hand went up and down in a jerking, stabbing motion. My heart was racing, and if anyone was with me, I would have felt incredibly embarrassed. I covered my mouth and made my way past Robo-Jason. The fog was getting a little much. I was beginning to feel lightheaded as I found the door to room 3. I placed my hand to the knob and jerked it back in pain. The knob was extremely hot. I placed my hand on the door itself and felt that it was warm. I couldn't hear anything from the other side, and I put my ear up to the warm wood, expecting to hear a fire, and heard nothing. I assumed it was just a warm, like they were pumping heat into it, like the final room in the Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at Disneyland. I took the corner of my dress and wrapped it around my hand, turning the doorknob as fast as I could, and I flung myself into room 3. There was no fire, just darkness, and it was a freezing cold room. Room 3 wasn't like the other rooms. It wasn't like the other rooms at all. At the moment, I knew something wasn't right. I tried to make out anything in the room, but I couldn't even see my hands grasping for the doorknob that now wasn't there. I was trapped. I must have been turned around in the darkness, even though I didn't move. Once I entered, I must have just gotten lost. In that moment, a light on the ceiling flashed on. A single spotlight, pointing directly down, illuminating a small table. And on that small table was a flashlight. Even though I really couldn't see where I was going, I moved forward. The light on the ceiling was enough to make my way to the table. As I reached the flashlight, I noticed a small tag attached to the handle. To Maggie, from management. The moment I finished reading, the light above me turned off, and I was again left in the darkness. I fumbled with the flashlight for a second before I was able to turn it on. For what seemed like every direction, a low and rumbling hum surrounded me. My heart was pounding and I started to spin in place, darting the beam of the flashlight all around me. There was nothing in the room, but after a while I noticed something terrifying. It could have been my imagination, but I could see a figure dart away at the last second whenever the beam of light hit. I began to panic, and I started backing away from the small table, unsure which direction I was going. The hum was getting louder, When I started to feel the presence of whatever was dodging the light, my hand shook wildly as I frantically shined the light in whatever direction I could think of. He was always there, just barely escaping back into the darkness every time, but he was getting closer. My eyes started to swell up with tears. I thought I was going to drop the flashlight. I was shaking so badly until I saw it. The light set directly on the small number 4. It was written on a piece of paper and taped to a wooden door in the corner. I ran as fast as I could with the flashlight pointed directly in front of me. I could feel it behind me. The hum was getting louder, and I thought I felt breath on my neck. I was sprinting at this point, only a few more feet to go. In one motion, I grabbed the handle, twisted, and slammed it shut behind me. I was now in the 4th room. I was outside. I wasn't in the house anymore. What awaited me after opening the door to room 4 was what looked like a cave. I looked down to the ground and I noticed something strange and disturbing. The ground wasn't made of grass or rock or dirt. It was wood paneling. It was the same floor as the previous rooms. This was room 4. Somehow I was still in that house. There were a few torches mounted to the side of the rock surrounding me. The cave beyond was pitch black. The torches looked like they could be taken down, so I walked over to the closest one and unsheathed it from its mounting. My body was covered in sweat, and I slowly made my way into the cave. The hum was gone, hopefully for good. No other noise met me inside the cave, but there was a slight breeze. The cave seemed to go on forever, and I was walking for what felt like hours, until I saw a faint blue light. I walked towards it, cautiously but at a decent pace. A light was an opening at the end of the tunnel. I started walking a little faster. I'd always hated cramped spaces like caves and tunnels. In the few moments the exit was within feet, before I knew it I was at the end. And exactly, that's where I was. The end. At the exit of the cave, the ground dropped off to a cliff. There was no other way to go. I looked back into the dark cave behind me. I knew there wasn't any turns. It was a straight tunnel. I looked, and I turned down over to the edge. What made my stomach turn was what I saw was an ocean, water, all around with nothing else in sight. The drop must have been 100 feet, with a small rock formation at the bottom. After a few seconds of studying the rocks, my stomach turned even more than I thought possible, and my body broke into a fresh sweat. The rocks formed a number. Rocks formed a 5. I stood up and backed away from the edge. I hated heights. I was stopped by a wall that shouldn't have been there. I turned and was met with a terrifying sight. The cave was gone. I was face to face with a solid stone wall, the side of whatever mountain this was. I had to keep telling myself I was still in the NoEnd house. I didn't leave. Clearly this isn't an actual mountain, but it felt so real. I turned back and looked over at the cliff again. There was no way this house was pretty messed up before now. I was outside for God's sake, but it expected me to now do this. This was just too much. I knew those rocks down there were meant. They were the entrance to room 5. There was no stairs leading down, no other paths to use. I was trapped again. The house wanted me to jump. The house wanted me to jump. I sank to the ground and curled into a ball. I couldn't do it. There was no way. I could jump off a cliff onto the jagged rock formation 100 feet below. My mind was split in two. I knew that I was still inside, but my surroundings screamed. In my ear, the opposite. I stayed there on the wooden ground for a while. At that point, I had lost all concept of time. After what seemed like weeks, I finally stood up. Slowly, I made my way to the edge of the cliff and looked down. The giant 5 taunted me to jump. I knew I couldn't do it, and it taunted me, and then the hum returned, a low and distant hum. It seemed to come from behind me, resonating within the mountain. I don't know what came over me, but after hearing that sound, something inside me lit up. I clenched my eyes shut, and I jumped. The wind was rushing as I fell, and deep fear washed over me. I was going to die. I was going to smash into those rocks and die. They were going to tear me apart, and I was going to die. I didn't care. I opened my eyes. I just fell, even with the loud wind around me. The hum was now deafening. I just wanted it to be over. I just wanted it to be over. I just wanted the rocks to hit me, and I just wanted it to be over. And then I stopped. I wasn't falling anymore, but I never hit the rocks. I opened my eyes and looked around. I was standing on the familiar wood paneling of the house, and the hum was gone, and the silence took its place. I had made it. I was in room 5. I don't know how it happened, but I was in room 5. The feeling of dread was gone. I was just incredibly happy to be alive. After a few moments to collect myself, I decided to look around at the rest of the room. My happiness left me fast. This room was empty. The walls matched the floor, the ceiling matched the walls, and the walls had no doors or windows. I was in a sealed box, and I realized I didn't make it. I wasn't safe. I just made it out of the 4th room, but only to enter room 5, and there was no leaving it. At that moment, I wondered if David had been in this room. I wondered if he had jumped off that same cliff and ended up stuck in this room. And if he did, that means he got out. He wasn't here. I was alone. He got out, and I would too. The thought of David escaping this room gave me newfound confidence, and a second wind filled my spirit. I was going to get out of this room, find David, and get us the hell out of here. I walked around the perimeter of the wall and felt any sort of inconsistencies. Nothing. The walls were flawless, barely a scratch on them, let alone some secret exit. I started to knock at random places on the walls. They were completely solid. The confidence started to leave me. I was running out of ideas. And that's when she spoke to me.
Maggie, you shouldn't have come here, Maggie.
I nearly jumped out of my skin, if that was possible. I was still facing the wall, and the voice had come from the middle of the room behind me. The voice was that of a little girl. At least that's what it sounded like. And I turned around and my eyes fell on who spoke to me. I was right. A little blonde girl, no more than 7 years old, with light blue eyes and a long white dress. She smiled at me and spoke again.
But now that you're here, let's play a game.
There was something horrifying about this little girl. She wasn't scary. She looked completely normal. If I saw her walking down the street, I would have just walked right on by. But looking into her eyes, I felt complete terror. Jumping off a cliff was scary, but I would jump off 20 cliffs twice as high if it meant I could take back 1 minute of looking into her soulless eyes. After a moment of staring, I finally spoke. What game? Who are you?
If you lose, you die.
If I win?
He dies.
My heart sank. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I knew she was telling the truth.
Which will it be?
Neither. I don't know where I found the courage to talk back to this child, but I had come too far just to let David die, and if I died, it was all for nothing. No, I choose neither. But then I saw it. The reason that the little girl terrified me. She was more than just a small child. Looking at her, I also saw what appeared to be a large man with the head of a ram. It was a horrible sight. I couldn't unsee one without seeing the other. The little girl stood in front of me, but I knew her true form. It was the worst sight I'd ever seen.
Too bad.
And with that, she was gone. I was alone once again. An empty and silent room, only this time something was added. A small table where she stood appeared from nowhere, as though it was there the whole time. There was something on it, but I couldn't tell from where I was. I walked up to the table and looked at the small object. It looked like a small razor, one you would find in an X-Acto knife. I reached out to pick up, and as I did, a scream left my mouth. When my hand came into view, I saw something that was never there before. It looked as though something was branded into my skin, a single number, 6. I looked back to the razor and noticed the tag attached to it. To Maggie, from the management. Thought you may need this. After reading that note, I started sobbing uncontrollably. Tears were rushing down my face harder than they ever have. And I've never cried like this, and I don't think I ever will. I fell to the ground and sunk my head into the hardwood floor. I was sobbing for hours just lying there on the ground. I don't know why I was crying. It wasn't about David, it wasn't even about how I was stuck here. There were still no doors in this room and I was still trapped. But complete and emotionless, I felt empty. And I clawed my way up from the ground and steadied myself against the table. My eyes fell on the razor and I picked it up. I was going to kill myself. I couldn't handle it anymore. I had had it. David was probably dead. I was trapped in here. It was over. I pressed the razor against my wrist, right above the 6 that had appeared in my skin. Sobbing came back and I just stood there, crying, with the razor pressed against my wrist. David was dead and I was about to die. Nothing mattered anymore. And with one deep cut, I sliced down my wrist. Immediately after slicing down my wrist, I was no longer in room 5. I didn't die. I knew that for sure. The sadness was gone, but I was no means happy. Tears were still finding their way down my face. The room I was in was similar to the previous one again. It had no doors, there weren't any lamps, but somehow I was able to see everything clearly. The room was completely empty. But before I had time to think what to do next, it went dark, and the hum from before returned. I covered my ears in protest. It was louder than it ever was. But it was all over in a moment, and the lights returned. Only this time, something was added to the room. There, in the middle of the room, strung up by chains and naked from the waist up, was David. It looked like he was tortured. Knife wounds littered his chest and arms. David! I ran up to him as fast as I could. He was conscious. I saw his chest move up and down, but he wasn't speaking. That's when I noticed what was etched into his chest. I dropped to my knees as I saw it. The 7 stared at me, as though it had eyes. I heard David try and speak. I tried to get as close as I could to him. David! David, can you hear me?
Maggie.
His voice was quiet, but he was talking.
What are you doing
I was
here?
thankful for that. David, I'm trying to save you. How do I get you down? There were padlocks from the chains holding him in place. I looked around the room for any sort of key, but all I found was the knife in one of the corners. The metal was way too thick for that knife to even dent it, so I disregarded it as useless. I went back to David. It looked like he was on the verge of death. And then I felt my pocket vibrate. As I suspected, one unread text. I flipped open the phone. That isn't me. I didn't know what to think. David was right here in front of me. But the text was from the first number that contacted me. It was from the first text I received from David that mentioned the NoEnd house.
Maggie.
I heard his voice clearly with my ears in my mind. It seemed like his voice was coming from all sides.
You have to go on.
What are you talking about? How? I was face to face with David, or whoever it was that was chained up here.
That knife.
He made a slight movement of his head towards the corner.
Go get it.
I ran and was immediately back with the knife clenched in my hand within a few seconds. I had no idea what was going on, but I needed to save him, and I would do anything.
Now stab me in the chest.
What? I was shocked. David hung there, staring directly into my eyes.
You have to run that knife through the 7 on my
No.
chest. It's the only way to save us both.
No, you're not making any sense.
Maggie!
He was screaming now. His eyes looked frantic. The side of his mouth curled into a twisted grin.
Maggie! Stab me now. It's the only
I
way.
looked down at the knife in my hand. My head felt as though I was being struck with a bat. I was at a complete loss. I clenched my eyes shut, and I felt the knife in my hand.
Maggie!
With a scream and a thrust, I stabbed the knife into David's chest. I don't know what came over me. I just knew that this was the only way. I opened my eyes and saw his face. I was terrified. Tears slid down his cheeks, and David looked me in the eyes.
Why did you do that?
He couldn't fool me. I know that wasn't David. It couldn't have been, or else I wouldn't have been able to stab him. I know that it wasn't. I know that it wasn't. His eyes rolled back as the life left him. But that's when it changed. The 7 on his body was gone. The blood dripped down on the ground into a pool below me. The crimson liquid stretched out into every direction, and the circle nearly filled the room. And I began to sink. I tried to move, but I couldn't. It was just like quicksand. The blood was up to my knees now. As much as I tried to struggle, I just sank deeper. I clawed and scratched at the wood around me. The lifeless body of David hung above me, his face smiling. The blood reached my neck. I was beyond terrified. Before long, I was submerged, and I fell into darkness. When I woke up, I was outside the house. I could feel the cold earth below me. I rolled onto my back and looked up at the night sky. The NoEnd house towered above me, complete with my car parked in the same spot. I wasn't sure whether I should laugh or cry. I was out. I got up and dusted off my pants. My body was still shaking as I walked to my car, but I still got a feeling of uneasiness. There's no way I escaped. The house wouldn't just let me go. Something was right. I knew it. I knew. I didn't kill David in the 6th room. I knew I didn't, but he was nowhere to be found. I reached down into my pocket and took out my phone. No unread messages, but I had service. I flipped it open and began to text David. "Where are you?" I wrote. Within a second of sending it, I got a reply. "Room 10. Your room. 7. Run." And the deafening hum returned. I bolted. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't outside. I was still in the house. The hum rattled everything around me. It shook the trees and the air itself. I just needed to find 8. I needed to find the next room. That was my only chance. I needed to find room 8. The first rooms were obvious, but as I progressed, it was getting less and less clear where the rooms started and ended. I had no idea what I was looking for. Anything that had a number on it. I need to find an 8. I need to find an 8. I need to find... Unread text. Your address. What the hell did he mean? My address. The hum was growing louder and louder, and that's what had hit me. My address. Address. It couldn't be. 4896 Forest Inn. Unit 8. I slammed into my car and flung the door open. The hum shook the metal of the car and it seemed to follow me inside. I floored it and made my way back to the dirt road towards my apartment. None of this was making sense. How was room 8 my apartment? Shouldn't I have trusted the text? It was from David. I know it was. There was no reason not to trust it. It took no time at all to drive to my complex, and honestly, I didn't even remember driving. It was like when you zone out for a minute and wake up further down the road. I didn't even bother locking it as I ran up to the front gate. My hands fumbled with the keys and I locked the bolt and made my way to the first hallway on the left. My complex was huge, but my apartment was the first one on the left. I ran as fast as I could. Past 4, past 5. My head was spinning. This night was weighing down on me like a lead vest. Past 6. The further I made it down the hallway, the further away the hum seemed to be. As I passed 7, I could barely hear it anymore. And when I stopped in front of my unit, I was in complete silence. I just stood there, standing in front of my apartment. Small gold 8 was at eye level with me. I reached for the doorknob and slowly slid my key in, twisted, and the door swung open, and I was sucked in like a vacuum, the door slamming behind me. Room 8. I got off the floor and looked around. It was identical to my apartment. If I didn't know any better, I would assume that it was my home, that all this was a bad dream. My mind went to David and I wondered what room 8 was to him. What was it that the house showed him? I walked around and studied the area. Literally everything was how I left it, right down to the half-eaten Chinese left out next to the sink. I looked over at my computer desk in the family room. The monitor was still on, and the instant messenger was still up and running. I walked over and sat in front of it, scrolling through my conversation with Peter. It was there, word for word. The house knew all of this, and I had no idea. To be honest, I tried my hardest not to think about it. The answer, no doubt, something was better off not knowing. I tried to click out of the instant messenger, but it wouldn't let me. The computer just froze. I clicked shut down, nothing. I tried everything. Nothing. And then a pop-up appeared on the screen. It was a video chat. I looked at the list of people in it, and there were 2 names, Maggie and Management. The video feed was live. All it showed was a gray wall. Then a message from Management popped into the text box. Hope everything is how you left it. Who are you? I responded. Enjoy the show. And that's when the camera turned on. The camera focused on a young man strapped to a surgical table. He was completely naked and sobbing quietly to himself. The image wasn't very clear, but I thought I had recognized the man laying there. He was tall, short brown hair, and a fairly pale complexion. This is what happens when people attempt to cheat. That's when I realized who it was. Strapped to the surgical table was Peter, and he wasn't alone. I don't want to describe what I watched at that moment. The screams the son of Peter made were unlike anything I've ever heard out of a human. But I couldn't look away. I wanted to, but I think it was the power of the room. I couldn't look away. Peter let out one final soul-curdling scream, but I didn't hear it through the computer speakers. It was coming from my room. My heart sank as I spun around towards the hallway. I could still hear the screams emanating as I walked towards the source. I reached my bedroom door, and the screams were now replaced by that hum. That hum. It had haunted me this entire time. I slowly opened the door and I saw inside my room what I had seen on my computer. It was a surgical table, with whatever was left of Peter strewn across its top. No one else was there. The others in the room were gone, but a chill went up my spine. The management was here with me, only one room away. I walked closer to the table. The stench was horrific, and it took me everything to stop from vomiting. I knew I was nearing the end. I had to be. I looked around the room. Somewhere in here was the entrance to the next room. And it was. But it was simpler than I expected. Across the room where my bathroom door should have been was a simple wooden door, similar to the early ones in the house. Something was stapled to the door, something long and bloody. Oh God, it was the entrails of Peter, and they formed a 9 on the door. I felt bad for Peter, but I had gone through hell this night. I walked right past the table, picked up a long surgical knife, and didn't give the body a second glance. The final door was there, and I walked right up to it. This night was about to end, and I was coming out of that room with David. I was going to stop whoever it was that was keeping him here. The door opened easily, and as I stepped through, I saw what was waiting for me. It was an empty room. It resembled a waiting room for a doctor's office. There were a few chairs lining the wall, crumpled up old magazines in a basket in the corner. Across the room, on the opposite side from where I came in, there stood a single door. My heart sank when I read the label printed on the wood. It wasn't a number. It was a single word. Management. I clenched the surgical knife in my hand. Alright, I'm fucking ending this. They were on the other side of that door, and I could feel it, and David was too. The hum was louder than it had ever been. I could feel it inside me. It was coming from inside me. As I walked, it got louder. As I placed my hand on the door, the room was filled with the sound. I turned the knob and opened the door. The room waiting for me was not what I expected. It was the front lobby. The same front lobby that began this entire hell. Only this time, there was someone behind the desk. My heart jumped out of my chest when I saw who it was. It was Peter.
Hello, Maggie.
Peter? No, there's no way. How?
Who were you expecting? A ghost? Satan? Some creepy little blonde girl?
What the hell is going on here?
Maggie, come on. Just think for 2 seconds. Who first told David about this place?
You didn't.
Who told you about David's whereabouts here?
God damn it, Peter, you were his best friend!
I'm sorry, Maggie, but that's how we run business here.
Where is he? Where is he?
He's in here. With us. In the house, Maggie. And he isn't going anywhere. And neither are you.
I don't know what took over me, but I lost it. I jumped over the counter and shoved Peter to the ground. I grabbed him by the hair and slammed his head into the ground. With a surgical knife in my other hand, pressed firmly against his neck. I wanted to kill him. I had to kill him. He killed David. He wasn't killing me.
Maggie, you can't. There's always going to be someone to run the house.
No. I slid the knife across his throat and slammed his head further into the ground. I don't think there will be. With his death, the room went dark. I could still feel the surgical knife, but I was no longer holding on to Peter's hair. I don't know for how long I was in the darkness, but it felt like ages. I stood and felt for the desk, balancing myself, with one hand on the other side of the marble surface. Then the lights came on. I could see the window across the room. It was still night out. I looked out and saw David. He was walking around outside, seemingly unharmed. I ran to the door and tried to open it. I was so happy. But the door wouldn't budge. I tried my hardest, but the door wouldn't let me out. I looked out the window and saw David as he began to walk down the dirt road. I rested my head against the door and sobbed. My stomach dropped. There pinned to my chest was a name tag with one word. Management.
David slumped into his living room chair in a daze. The last couple of hours were a complete blur. Haunting images would sporadically cross over his mind, slowly reminding him of the hell that he was leaving behind. He felt in his pocket for his phone, dialed 911. There was no way that he could explain any of this. But for some reason, his first reaction was to call. Maybe they could just go there and confirm that this was a normal house, nothing more. That could put his mind at ease. And he could just be at home, live a normal life with... He bolted to his feet again. He ran all over the house, looking in every room, every direction. David grabbed the phone off the charger and dialed Maggie's number. Come on, pick up. Pick up.
Hey, this is Maggie. I'm sorry I missed your call. Leave me a message after the beep and never return to the NoEnd house.
He flung the front door open. He slammed the door to his car shut, and David tore back to the house. Maggie was in there. As he drove, he flipped through his phone, looking for the old text that he knew that he sent. There was nothing. There were texts to Maggie from Maggie, but all of them were blank. David swore under his breath as he reached the house. He stumbled out of the car and fell to the dirt road. Picking himself up, he ran with all of his might and slammed his body against the front door of the house. He tried the knob. No use. With both of his fists, he pounded on the door, screaming Maggie's name. Nothing. His fists were red and burning. David slumped to his knees, palms dragging down the door as he went. After a few moments, David felt his eyes sting. She was in there. He knew. The woman he loved went to save him, and in doing so took his place. He had to find a way in. There had to be a way in. David got to his knees with renewed energy, but before he could move, he felt his phone vibrate. It was a text. And looking at the name gave him relief. Peter. It was Peter Terry. Maybe he could help.
Hey, Dave. You alright? Haven't heard from you in a while.
Peter! Jesus! Where are you?
I'm in the house. I went in to find you, man. I told you not to go.
It's past now. Whatever, but Peter, I need to get back in. Do you know how?
Go around back. There's an oak tree next to the house with a trapdoor at its base. Go through there. It's a service entrance.
Why the fuck would this place need a service entrance?
Just get to the tree, man. I'm trying to help you.
David didn't have time to ask anything more. He took off, running down the porch to the other end of the house, leaping over the side rail and landing in an awkward pile below. He could see the tree wasn't far, or maybe it was. It was so big that depth perception was hard to figure. And was that even there before? Yeah, he had other shit in his mind earlier, and who really takes notice of trees, but this one... It was massive. He ran up to the side, and there it was. A small wooden door on the ground below it. like one of those old cellar doors that houses used to have leading into their basements. David looked around him and behind his back. He wasn't even sure why he did. He just had one of those feelings. Shaking it off, David yanked on the handle. The rusted hinges groaned in protest, but after a few hard pulls, it gave way and revealed the darkness below. With a heavy sigh, David slowly made his way down. Jesus, it was dark. But soon, David was hit with a smell that put the darkness to shame. It was like burnt hair covered in shit and mold. He spit onto the ground. He could fucking taste the smell. David got his phone out and turned it to the highest brightness. It wasn't much, but he was at least able to see the surrounding walls. Looking around in the dim light, David noticed something strange. He hadn't been in too many underground tunnels, to be fair, but he assumed the walls would be dirt, mud, or something like that. He couldn't quite see what it was, but it wasn't anything man-made, or that could pass as dirt. Curiosity got the better of him, and with his phone outstretched, he went up to one of the side walls. He had to get with the phone almost touching the wall, David's eyes grew wide. No. It can't be. With his other hand, David prodded at the wall. It gave a bit, but it was solid. He was reminded of the smell, and now knew its origin. This was flesh. The walls of the tunnel were covered in burnt skin. David moved the phone a few inches and followed the light. He saw areas where different skins were sewn together with some rough metallic string, almost like copper wire. One section made his stomach turn over on itself. It was a face. A human face, stretched out, elongated, with the eyes and mouth sewn shut. The nose was removed, and the hole that was left behind was sutured as well. Maybe it was the smell, or the sight of this, but David couldn't take it. With a lurch, he turned to the side and vomited on the ground. The tunnel went on for ages. What was most likely only a few minutes felt like hours to David. He had to get inside and save Maggie, but nothing else mattered. Peter was his friend, but if it came down to it, Maggie was the first to save. Peter could rot there if need be. Then again, he was the one person that told him about this path. David's mental debate ceased after something from behind him touched him. With a start, he spun around and was face to face with nothing. Confused, David brought his phone up and reached out into the blackness. Nothing. Nothing except a wall. A wall that wasn't there 2 minutes ago. Rank and covered in flesh. David screamed and pounded on the wall in front of him, and it gave only slightly. The wall was shrinking, trapping him in as he walked. It hit David like a train. He was in the service tunnel, but he was in the house. It had him. There was no going back. The house was pulling him in. And it was glad to see him. Earlier, this may have fazed David more than it did at this moment. There, in that hell tunnel, David barely flinched. He had seen what this place was capable of, and he had witnessed some of the most sanity-testing experiences imaginable. He had seen it all. Or at least he thought. As he walked, David could now hear the tunnel shrinking in from behind. The grinding, sloshing noise of flesh twisting on itself to seal him in made him feel sick again. But he only sped up his walking, and after a moment he heard something that made him stop dead in his tracks. It was a voice. The girl's. It wasn't Maggie's.
Why did you come back? Why? Why did you come back?
David stood there, frozen. The voice seemed to come from everywhere. The screaming was getting closer, and David braced himself against the back wall.
Why, David? Why did you come back?
Soon he heard the thudding footsteps of someone running towards him, and then he saw her. A girl, no older than 13, running up to him, yelling her constant question, and David was too stunned to react short of just standing there. The girl ran up to him, began pounding on his chest with her fists, hard at first, but then weakening, like a spoiled girl hitting the ground when she doesn't get her way.
Why, David? Why did you come back?
The girl slumped to her knees in front of him. With one final hit against his leg, David stood there in shock, hands slightly raised and tense. His fears began to ease out of him. She clearly wasn't a threat and didn't seem to be a ghost or anything. "Hey," he began, "it's all right." "Who are you?" The girl jumped slightly at his words. Slowly, she lifted her head to look at David. His heart sank as he saw her face. For sure, it wasn't Maggie. It wasn't anyone he knew.
You came back to save us, didn't you?
The girl stood up and brushed her hair out of her face. For some reason, even taking how terrified she should be to David, there was something oddly normal about the girl. She had shoulder-length brown hair. She was skinny as a rail, with a few specks of freckles across her nose and cheeks. Even her clothes could have been found in any store. Black tank top, jeans tucked into black red boots. She was older than he first thought as well, closer maybe to 16. If she even had an age. A hum from behind them startled them both and dragged David back into his current situation.
We have to go, now!
And the girl grabbed his hand and took off. Surprised, David followed and nearly dropped his phone. He tried to hold it up as far as he could to light the way. The hum from behind was growing louder as they approached the first fork in the tunnel. Without hesitation, the girl veered them over to the right. Clearly, she knew where she was going, and David wasn't about to argue. After a moment, the humming stopped. And there they stood in front of a ladder, leading up into darkness.
Just up here!
David snapped back into reality, and he was incredibly confused. "Wait!" The girl stopped mid-climb and looked over her shoulder.
Look, I know this is weird.
No, I know what weird is. I've seen weird. Who are you?
I'll explain soon, okay? We just really kinda need to get out of here, okay? No one's supposed to be here, and we are. So...
And with that, the girl returned to her climb. David was about to retort, but the hum from behind grew louder. Survival outweighed understanding at that point, and David grabbed the ladder and followed the girl, leaving that tunnel for hopefully the last time. The ladder led the pair into an empty room. It almost looked like a huge broom closet. A few scattered buckets and mops were lining the walls, but for being a part of that house, it was very unassuming. The girl next to him shook herself off and shoved her hand towards David. Her mood swings were clearly something to be impressed with, and David reluctantly took her hand and shook it.
You're probably wondering who I am and why I know you. My name is Natalie, and this is my house.
What are you talking about? How is this your house? This fucking place is your house?
I know, but you have to understand what happened. It wasn't always like this.
What the hell is this thing down there, with the walls?
Yes, I know. This is all a part of it. It all relates. Just let me explain.
Natalie paused and looked at David. He closed his mouth and looked back at her, letting her know that she was now free to talk without interruption.
This is my house. I know it may seem like hell right now, and you're right. It is. My family kind of dealt in some weird stuff. We moved into this house about 10 years ago, and it was nice. A small, quaint place. The problem is, my family, we can do things. But some of us, like my brother, took it a bit too far. Peter was never one to listen to reason.
Peter. The ideas were circling David's head, but he wasn't quite ready to accept it. Peter had been his friend for years, he thought.
This one night, 7 years ago, my brother took it too far. He needed more. We would ask him why he was so obsessed with all of this, and he would only respond by asking why not. What happened over the next few nights? It's kinda hard to talk about it.
Even in the darkened room, David could tell this memory really pained the young girl. All of this hell, was because of her brother. His friend. It seemed to David that the girl was just as much prisoner as he was. All right. David put his hand on her shoulder. Let's get you out of here, then.
No. This is my house. I need to get it back from Peter. I'm not leaving it.
David thought for a moment, and met eyes with Natalie again. Okay. If you can help me find Maggie, my girlfriend, can get us out of here, I'll help you get this house back. David took a look at his surroundings. His heart jumped slightly as he glanced around. Aside from the hatch in the floor that they had just entered through, there was no other exit. Just smooth cement walls. Do you know where we are? He asked the girl, hoping to God that she had some idea.
Yeah, of course. It's, my house, isn't it?
And with that, she made her way over to one of the far walls. The surface of the wall was a smooth, brushed gray cement. There was no way through, no door, nothing. Natalie reached into her pocket and took out what looked like a small piece of artist's charcoal. She pressed it to the wall and began drawing a long, swooping line about 3 feet in length. Line after line followed, and David watched in awe as the girl stood back and admired her work. David admired the work as well as Natalie. What she had drawn was the crude, yet somehow accurate drawing of a door. In the direct middle was a single line. Natalie placed the charcoal back into her pocket and ran her fingers through her hair. After a moment of silence, she raised her hand and placed her palm right against the symbol, resting 2 fingers against her temple with the other. At first, David thought that she was speaking to him, but then realized that she was chanting in some kind of weird language. Soon the symbol began to vibrate, and David watched as it began to steadily glow a deep purple. Natalie smiled to herself as she felt the wall shake before it split in 2. The wall slid closed behind me and Natalie. The wall was smooth. Perfectly smooth, as if the doorway was never there before. Ahead of us was another room. It was empty. Old. And dusty. Where are we?
Room 1. I can't get us into the management room directly, and this is the fastest way through.
She walked further into the room towards the door on the opposite side. She moved fearlessly ahead. I couldn't help but feel like she knew something that I didn't. It was a good feeling, though, to know that she wasn't afraid of the house, helping me to no longer be as afraid. This can't be room 1, I said. Room 1 was filled with shitty Halloween decorations.
Room 1 is always filled with decorations. It's how the house plays with you. It knows what you're not afraid of.
There's nothing here.
This is my room 1. I've never had a Halloween.
I didn't say anything to her after that. But I definitely questioned how the fuck could no one have had a Halloween. Maybe it's that family that she talked about. Maybe they never celebrated. Either way, if she knew the house, what other option did I have but to follow? She placed her hand on the doorknob and walked through the door labeled 2. Room 2 was the same size as room 1, but this room was filled with playground equipment. Natalie's stride never broke. She continued deeper into the room, and I followed at a steady pace, falling in behind her. I couldn't help but look in awe at the slides and swings as we passed along the way. This was so different from my room 2. No paper ghosts or smoke machines. It was almost eerie. If I hadn't spent so much time in the house already, I would have been shocked. At some point, I must have been lost in my thoughts a while, staring at the golden 3 that was screwed into the brown wooden door in front of me. I had to catch myself from bashing my head into it and giving myself a bloody nose. I must have zoned out. I looked back at Natalie as she came through the room, looking at the swings as she went by. I could have sworn she was ahead of me a moment ago. Out of instinct, I reached for the knob.
Wait!
In the last split second, I turned my head to see as Natalie reached out to me before my hand touched the knob for room 3. Instantly, the room went black. My hand grasped nothing. I felt around in front of me, frantically trying to find the door that I knew I was standing in front of just a moment earlier. I found nothing. Just blackness. And silence. God damn it! I was in the blackness again. That fucking blackness that was my room 4 must be Natalie's room 3. I felt the panic rising in me again. All confidence from watching Natalie earlier was gone. I outstretched my arms in all directions, trying to find a wall or a door. Natalie? Where are you? I called into the darkness. No response. She had to be in this room, just not around me. Natalie! Then I heard something. The hum. That fucking hum was back. It was soft again. It started to build. The panic was definitely back. The house knew that this was the worst thing that it could give me, and it was torturing me with it again. I started moving. If I kept going in one direction, I'd have to find a wall. Even if it's not the door, I could follow the wall until I found a way out. I must have been moving faster than I thought as I crashed into something hard that shook and fell over. It startled me, but I don't think it could have been a person. Last time I was in this room, I knew that I was alone, but this time, I was sure something had to be here. Suddenly, a flash lit up, flooding the room with temporary light. It had been a stool. And what had rolled off of it was a flashlight. No, that couldn't be it. Why? Why? Before I had a chance to look for the exit, the lights went out again, and then I was thrust back into blackness. I dropped to my hands and knees, searching where the afterimage of the flashlight still was. I grasped it, and prayed that the light hadn't broken when it fell. The beam nearly illuminated the whole room with light. Thank God it still worked. Directly ahead of me was a handwritten 4 in black Sharpie on a glass door. Thanks to the light, I noticed a tag on the flashlight. To David. With love from management. The fuckers were toying with me, weren't they? This time. But this time, I'm with... I searched the room again. Natalie was nowhere to be found. All 4 walls. The door. No Natalie. Reluctantly, I continued to the exit. If Natalie was still in the house with me, I'd find her. I found that the glass door was so fogged up I couldn't see through it. But whatever was on the other side, It radiated cold. I opened the door and stepped in. Room 4 didn't require the flashlight. It was cold, that's for damn sure, but it wasn't dark. It was a well-lit meat locker. Row after row of cow and pig carcasses hung in all directions. Whomever this was intended to feed, they must have had a killer appetite. The chill made it hard to stay still for too long. I rubbed my hands over my exposed arms and moved one of the meat slabs to the side, looking beyond. More meat. I continued deeper, and even more meat still. I moved further on in silence, passing by carcasses of every noticeable animal the further that I went. I soon found my hands and clothes were sticky and red with the blood of the hanging beasts of all different shapes and sizes. To make things even more confusing, I began to see animals that I didn't recognize. Creatures with more than 4 legs, which didn't seem possible to me. Finally, I came across one that I did recognize. I was expecting to see this from the moment that I entered the meat locker, but that didn't save my stomach from turning at the sight. A human body, skinned, decapitated, hung in my way. I tried not to look, and pushed past. This was disgusting. More and more bodies hung from the ceiling closer together, and to make matters worse, the temperature was starting to rise. The bodies were suffocating enough, but the air became thick with the stench of wet rot. They were squeezing me enough to almost rise me off the ground while pushing my way through. The frozen meat had become soft, squishy. Pulling off chunks as I pushed my way past, I coughed and held my hand over my face to keep myself from vomiting. Little help that did. I ended up covering myself in more blood. I couldn't do this. I couldn't move. I was going to die here, drown in blood and bodies. I reached my arm deeper into the bodies and rested my head on a blood-soaked ribcage, suspended in the air, drawing in breath as much as I could through my mouth to save myself from the smell. The coppery taste of blood on my tongue and the stench filled my nose, smothering me. I was starting to lose consciousness. Something grabbed me. I was going to recoil my arm, but I couldn't. The hand had grabbed me tightly along my forearm. I was being pulled back towards the hand's origin, pulling me out of the bodies and into room 5. I found Natalie looking down at me. I was sitting at the base of the door as a blue light illuminated Natalie's look of anger. I could breathe again. Natalie was back. Finally, my panic began to subside.
Don't you ever touch a door without me!
You could have said something beforehand. This isn't my house. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get my girlfriend and get out of... A vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my phone to find another text from Peter. Don't trust her. Natalie looked down at my phone and snatched it out of my hand. She angrily pointed the phone at me accusatively.
Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? You're talking with Peter? Do you know what this is? This is the house. Phones can't work here. You are talking to the house. You can't trust me? I have told you everything about this house. I led you back into the house, and you can't trust me?
He just sent that to me. Don't fucking accuse me of anything. I gruffly snatched my phone back from her hand and shoved it back into my pocket. I pushed her to the side and moved into the room. I hadn't taken in the room until this point, but the blue lights finally made sense. We were at an indoor pool, lit around the edges by submerged lights. What is this? We walked over to the pool and looked in. I could see the bottom with the lit up 6. Next to the water's edge was a yellow scuba tank. Just one. I knelt beside it as she dipped her fingers into the waters to test it. She didn't recoil or scream, so as far as I could tell, the water was safe enough. I inspected the tank. As expected, there was another note. With love. From management. Fucking management. Was it Peter that was giving me these things? If it was, why? Why help me? I ripped off the tag and placed it in my pocket. Picked up the tank. I handed it to Natalie. We're gonna have to share.
Can you trust me with it? I want my house back, David. I want to control this house. Can you trust me more than Peter?
I did not look away from her. I weighed her. I had no idea why she would want this house. But I needed her. I shook my hand for her to take the tank from me. She did, and fixed the rebreather into her mouth. I needed her. I didn't trust her. Two things became apparent when entering the water. The lights on the 6 at the bottom of the pool were off as soon as we entered. And the water was surprisingly warm. If I didn't feel like my life was in danger, I might have actually enjoyed this swim. We dove down, and it quickly became evident that the 6 at the bottom did not signify 6 feet. The bottom seemed to almost drop away. We swam down, taking a break every so often to breathe from Natalie's rebreather. The pressure grew stronger as we descended, and the lights began to fade. After a few minutes, I felt like I should be seeing anglerfish swimming around as it became darker and darker. I searched my body and found the flashlight that I was still holding from room 3. It couldn't hurt to try. And a beam of light shot out into the darkness in the water. I took another hit of fresh air from Natalie's rebreather and saw her looking at the light and then back up at me. Her expression told me that we would have another heated conversation about the flashlight when we got out of the water. I pointed it downward. Still no bottom. We pressed on downward. I felt a current of motion in the water above me. I turned the flashlight upward and searched the water. By this point, there was nothing around. The water was pitch black in all directions. I couldn't even see the surface anymore. I looked back towards Natalie, who looked at me confused. I wrote it off as another hallucination. Just the house messing with me. And continued downward. The house was getting to me, and I was jumpy as it was. The current changed again, and this time I could feel it closer. I swam close to Natalie to take another breath from the O2 tank and pointed the flashlight in all directions to check again. Still nothing but blackness. Her hand rested on my wrist, and she looked at me concerned. I tried to communicate with her, but it was impossible without speech. How do you say, "I think there's a lake monster in here," without words? Suddenly, her grip tightened, and her body thrashed about. The rebreather dropped from my mouth. I snatched at her wrist and caught her expression. Her eyes were wide with panic as she looked down at her leg. Something was there. Something that was a deep blue or a black. I couldn't see it clearly, and I couldn't point the light directly at it with all the thrashing. I couldn't let her go. I needed her. She needed to get me to the end of this house. She opened her mouth to scream, but only bubbles escaped in the pressure underwater. She needed the O2 tank or she'd drown. But there was too much going on to think how to fix it. It was all happening too fast. I couldn't put it all together. Her grip loosened. And she was gone in an instant. Into the black water. I pointed the flashlight in the direction that she went in. Nothing. Darkness. She was gone. But the oxygen was gone as well, and the panic was setting in. My chest started to burn. Finally, I looked down. I was at the bottom. And below me was a large white 6 painted perfectly on the sheet of glass. It was right here. But that was impossible. With all the thrashing, I should have been ascending, not descending. But it was the bottom nonetheless. I looked upwards again, trying to find Natalie. I couldn't continue without her, but my air was running out. The pressure at this depth was pushing precious oxygen out of my lungs. I looked back at the glass and bashed it with the flashlight. Nothing. Shit! I have to get through this. How was I supposed to when I was underwater? I bashed it again as hard as I could with the water resistance holding me back. A crack. Thank God, a fucking crack. I willed back again, but my body betrayed me, and I took in a short inhale of water. I choked and held a hand over my nose and mouth. This can't be happening. There was nowhere else to go. I couldn't go back up. The crack grew below me. I kicked at it as hard as I could. I flooded into room 6, completely dry but coughing water out of my lungs and gasping for precious air. On my hands and knees, crying, coughing, I fell to my side. I didn't want to continue. I'd already gone through this hell once. What the hell was I doing here again? What could be worse than this fucking torture? You've been cheating. The first time I heard that voice, I nearly jumped out of my skin, but this time, I remembered her. And just like last time, she wasn't going to let me pass out. I caught my breath and stood up to face her. Just like before, the girl and the beast consumed the same space. I couldn't keep looking at her for long, but I did what I could to not show how much my head throbbed from looking at them. You can't have a partner. That's cheating, you know. Is she alive? Is who alive? Maggie doesn't like this new girl. That struck it. Maggie was here. She knew it. I was getting closer. How do you know Maggie? Is she here? Do you know where she is? Who's Maggie? Stop fucking with me! Fuck this house! Fuck Peter! Fuck whatever the hell you are! Give me Maggie, and get me the fuck out of here!
Fine.
This time she didn't sound like the little girl. This time she sounded like Maggie. That was the last straw. Oh, fuck you! I turned my back to the thing. I was going to move on. I ran my hands over the wall, looking for the door. What did I have to do this time? I slammed my fist against the wall, searching for the hollow point with no result. It was solid. Did I need to scratch the 7 into the door again? I took my nail and started to trace the shape of the 7 into the paint.
That's not going to work.
I spun around to look the little girl in the face and tell her to shut her goddamn mouth. But I was near speechless to find Maggie standing before me. She couldn't be real. She couldn't be there. Nonetheless, I was fighting back happy tears and the urge to run to her and hold her in my arms again. Maggie? Is this really you, or is this the house? I have to know.
It's fine, I understand. You want Natalie back, right? Is she your new girlfriend, David?
No, it's not like that. She's helping me rescue you.
Wasn't that your fault, though? Didn't you lead me to this house?
No, Maggie, I didn't want you to come here. I was just trying to make some quick cash.
No, David. I think you were fucking a girl behind my back. I think you told Peter to bring me here. I think you wanted me out of the way.
Maggie's hand slid from behind her back, holding a surgical scalpel. Maggie, this is crazy. Why would I kill you? Calm down.
No, David. I'm done with your lying and your bullshit. I'm done with you.
Maggie, stop. This house is fucking with us, okay? This isn't you. I swear to God, it isn't you, and whatever you were seeing, it wasn't me.
No, David.
She pointed the knife at herself. and raised her hand into the air. The light from the one light bulb shining above her gleamed off the blade. My hand came up from my side. This isn't real. I swear, this has to just be the house fucking with me. She wouldn't say this. She couldn't do this.
This is real.
I screamed louder than I ever screamed as she plunged the knife into her chest. I watched it unfold in front of me like a horror movie. She stared at me right in the eyes and covered her body in blood. She repeatedly thrust the scalpel into her chest and her throat over and over and over. She fell to the floor in a heap. I still stood there screaming. If this was real, like she said, what had I done? When my throat was finally hoarse from screaming, I dropped to her side and held her. Tears were streaming down my face as I sobbed. All I could say was, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry," continuously. As much as I wanted to believe that this was the house playing with me, I couldn't help it. This was Maggie. I loved this girl, and now I looked over her wounds. Her cuts formed a 7 in her chest. If the house could laugh at me, I'm sure it would have. The tears stopped. My body shook. I wanted to scream and cry and burn this goddamn house to the ground. I placed my hand on the scalpel that was still sticking out of the 7 in Maggie's chest and pulled. I was outside. Room 8 is always outside. I sat there in front of the NoEnd house, but somehow I knew I was still in the NoEnd house. I looked around me as though I was the living dead. I was just holding my dead girlfriend. I was just there, watching her yell at me, watching her break, and watching her commit suicide. Was she even really in the house? Have I just been stuck in this house the whole time? The house was going too far. It was too much. I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't anymore. I wanted out. Vibrations in my pocket again. I was shocked that my phone was still working after swimming in the pool for so long. But then again, I ended up out of room 5 without a drop of water on me. It was Peter.
David, you have to go home.
Peter, what the fuck is going on? I'm in the house, and this girl said that you were the one running it.
She's not wrong. And she's not right. Go home, David.
I can't. I'm back in the house already.
No, you're outside. Go home.
Fuck you. I put my phone back in my pocket and pulled out my keys. The house had told me all I needed to know. If I was outside, if I was really outside, I would go to the police. I'd contact anyone that could help me. We'd tear the house down brick by brick if we had to get Maggie out. I started up my car and backed away from the house. Finally, I didn't know if it was real or not, but it felt good to at least watch the house fade into the darkness behind my car as I traveled down the dirt road. 10 minutes later, I was finally back into town and parking my car on the street next to the police station. I turned off the car, rested my head on the steering wheel. A sigh escaped my lips. Please. Please be real, I whispered to myself. And if it is, it's felt like years since I spoke to another human being who wasn't involved with this house. I prepped myself as much as I could and got out of the car. A small stoop sat before the police station, and I hopped up the steps quickly. Only to come to a sight that I dreaded to see. Across both the doors of the police station in black paint was spray-painted a large 8. I shook my head in disbelief. I knew that I was still in the house, but it knew that I would come here. That was insane. Peter just told me that I was outside. He was fucking with me. He was running things here. I pulled my phone from my pocket. No new text messages. Dialing 911, I placed the phone to my ear. If I couldn't get in, maybe I could call someone to come out.
David, go home and forget about the house.
I dropped my phone. That was Peter's voice. This was the house. This was the fucking house again. I ran back down the stairs and got into my car. I started it up. I had no idea where I was going or where I could go to. I just drove. Every store, every house, every fucking mailbox I passed. 8. 8s were on everything, on every street. No matter where I turned, there was the door to the next room. I couldn't enjoy being out of the house. I couldn't get help. I was helplessly trapped in the NoEnd house. I made it home. I don't know how or why I drove home. I didn't think I was driving home, but here, I was parked in my driveway again. The door of my car creaked open, and I looked up at my door. There was no 8. Closer and closer I came to it, but not one 8 this time. My neighbors all had 8s. My door had a glowing green exit above it, like you would see at the halls of a school. The house had to be lying to me. This couldn't be the exit. But if Peter was the management, maybe he really wanted me out of the house. Maybe I was too close, and he knew that I was. Freedom is right here. And all I had to do was walk out. My breathing was so much harder, my hands moved to the doorknob of the exit. Why was I even here anymore? Why not risk the exit? Another vibration. Maggie's dead. Forget about her and move on. I looked at the illuminated screen. Maggie. Didn't I drop my phone at the police station? I thought. I took my hand away from the doorknob. The humming was back. The house was pushing me to leave. The management wanted me to leave. That means Maggie couldn't be dead. I took a step back away from the door. Maggie was here. I walked down the steps of my house. Maggie needed me. I walked up to my neighbor's door with a large 8 painted on it. We were going to get out of here together. I entered room 8. I was in the room again. One chair. One light. The door behind me was gone again. I didn't have to turn to know that, but my eyes didn't leave what was in front of me. Peter sat in the chair before me. He looked like he always did, no blood, no weapons. He just sat there, in his t-shirt and jeans, looking me right in the eyes. He stood up and smiled at me like he was happy to see me, and I continued to look on at him. He did all this to me. To us.
Was it worth another $500, David? Killing Natalie? Killing Maggie?
What? Me? Was this guy serious? Was he going to blame me for all this? He got me involved. He was the one running this fucking house. He was blaming me for all of my torture. Are you real, Peter?
Am I real? Was Natalie real? Or was that the house pushing you further? Because you wanted to go through the service entrance. You wanted to cheat and make your way in and back out again easily.
Stop it! I didn't do anything.
That's not how NoEnd House works, David. You know that.
I'm doing the right thing here. I'm trying to get Maggie out.
There are consequences, David. This is your fault.
Peter, I don't care about what kind of shit you're wrapped up in, man. Your family can be witches or vampires or werewolves, whatever the fuck, man. I don't care. I want out. I just want Maggie, and I want out.
You killed them, David. Their blood is on your hands. You had your chance to get out, David, and you didn't take it. And now, the only thing...
Peter's brain was in chunks all over the floor. There was a large hole through his left eye. He fell to the floor in front of me. Two. I watched 2 of the closest people to me die today. I had nothing to say. I just looked at his body as blood pooled around him on the floor from the gaping wound in his head. Natalie stood behind him with a smoking pistol in her hand. She was soaking wet and limped towards me. She was furious and exhausted. The house was really playing tricks on my mind for the past few rooms, but whatever she had seen was far more physically taxing. Tears welled up. Why couldn't we have let him live? I wanted to say. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out.
He was the door,
she said, reading my expression. I turned around to the direction that she was gesturing. And there was the large golden 9 screwed to an oak door.
He's not the real Peter. The real Peter is the management. He was probably going to talk you into killing yourself with this.
She tossed the pistol towards me and I caught it. The barrel was still warm from the bullet that she put through Peter. That Peter had disappeared. The blood and the brains as well. I looked over to the gun to find another note. Don't be afraid. With love. Management.
With love? Want to explain something to me about your relationship with Peter?
I swallowed hard. This wasn't like last time. Management was helping me. Management wanted me to leave. Something changed. No, I wouldn't. You want to explain where you went to?
You mean after you abandoned me?
Look, I just want Maggie, and I want to get out of the house. Whatever happened to you, I thought you were dead. She stared at me, anger in her eyes, and I stared right back, unblinking. I didn't give a shit where she'd been. I was at room 9, and she had done what she needed to.
Just get me my fucking house back and get out!
We walked into the lobby. On the table again was a letter that read congratulations. But we didn't take the exit. We walked right past the front desk to the door to room 1, which now had a metal plaque that read, Management. The door opened with a click, and we stepped into the room. In the center of the room was a desk. All walls surrounding it had large windows showing the outside of the house. And sitting behind the desk was Maggie. On her chest was pinned, Management. Is that her? The real her? Natalie nodded in disbelief. I ran to Maggie's side. I grabbed a hold of her shoulders and turned her towards me. She was in some kind of trance. She just stared straight ahead. I shook her a bit, trying to break her free. Maggie? Maggie, is that you? Please. Please be okay. I grabbed the hold of that accursed management pin and threw it across the room. I just wanted the house to be as far away from us as it could be. And finally, her eyes focused. Oh, she was coming too. I knelt next to her and looked into her eyes. I brushed some of her hair out of her face so that she could see me clearly. Maggie, it's okay. I've got you now. We can go home.
No! Not real! Not real!
She was hysterical. She clawed and punched herself away from me. She cowered into the corner, screaming, Maggie, it's me! I swear, it's me! I was confused. I looked back to Natalie. There was something wrong. Natalie bent down and picked up the pin that I had thrown. She turned it over in her hands, eyeing it like it was solid gold. She slowly placed it onto her shirt.
You didn't. I don't believe it. You actually killed him? You're the new management?
I looked back to Maggie, sobbing in the corner, looking towards the window. My hand moved over to the tag on the gun again. She was management? Maggie's eyes stared at the large windows. Maggie saw me leave the house. Maggie saw me use the service entrance. Maggie saw me enter the room. She saw me dive into the pool. She saw me drive to my house. She watched me waver and come back for her. She watched the false Peter die. She watched me walk into the management office. She was watching as I looked at the pistol in front of her. She saw me reach for her. Maggie's eyes ran down her face and looked back towards me, screaming and scratching at my arm.
No! No, not real! Not real!
I pulled my arm back before she could mess me up further. What's wrong with her?
She broke. The house wins. That's what always happens. The house wins. She was never ready to power the house. Peter couldn't either. Not like I could. Peter was right. He was right all this time. The power in this house, it's intoxicating. This is my house.
You have your house back. You can fix her. You have what you want. Now give me what I want. Let me and Maggie escape. I helped you. Help me.
You want to get out with Maggie? Okay.
Natalie raised her hand, pointing in Maggie's direction again. Maggie screamed and grasped at her head. She looked back up at the two standing in the office. And I was horrified to see the word exit scratched into the skin of her forehead. No. No. No, you can't do that!
If you want out of the house, this is the only way. You know the rules. You face a trial to go through the door. This is your trial. Shoot her, David. Set her free and get out of my house.
I won't do that! This isn't fair!
When has this house been fair? If you want out, then open the door. Do you really want to leave her like this? Suffering? Crazy? She could never have a normal life again, David.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that to her. Maggie was sobbing, and I was holding the pistol in my hand. The weight of the gun becoming greater with each passing second, my grip on the gun tightened. And I aimed the barrel at Natalie. You let us out. You let us out, or I'll kill you.
And then you'll be management. You aren't special, David. Not like me. Never even Peter. And then you will be trapped here forever. With her. The house will make you just as crazy as that little bitch of yours. Leave, David. How long have you been in the house? I'm sure you want out as badly as she does, and she's practically asking you to kill her. There is nothing for you here. There's nothing for her here. Kill her, David. End the suffering for her. She needs it.
Natalie can't be right. There must be another way out of this room. I looked to the windows. They led outside, didn't they? The doorway we came through. It must be locked, but I could break the windows. I knew I could get out of here. I moved my hand to point the gun at the windows. But I couldn't stop myself. The gun pointed directly at Maggie. I pulled my arm in the direction of the windows again, and my body betrayed me. The gun was pointed at Natalie. The house had control of me. It was fucking with me again. She was right. The house was making me choose. And I only had one choice left. I lowered the gun to my side. Maggie. I'm so sorry, Maggie. I'm so sorry.
You're doing the right thing, David.
I'm sorry, Maggie. I'm so sorry, Maggie. Maggie, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But now that I'm management, we don't have to be apart anymore. We can be together. Forever.